Hello, and welcome to our last session on the book, Lover of Us All. The last two chapters of the book, when I reflected on it, it seems to me, while they're brief, in a way they summarize everything I've ever said about Angela. So I'd like to kind of run back over where we've been. First, we talked about what she was doing and what she was like. Then we talked about the process of canonization, which in a way was very technical, but it's interesting also, especially the fact that there was an Ursuline, a Venetian Ursuline, who spent her life promoting the canonization of Saint Angela. So it only kind of leaves us to reflect also on the book, Also in Your Midst, because that book delved much more into Angela's spirituality. That was its purpose, was to reflect about Angela's spirituality. Not so much her life, although it's significant that she was a woman of the Renaissance, and that just like the people of that time, she was faced with a world that was changing greatly. And also there was the movement of the Renaissance itself, which emphasized certain aspects of reality that had not been really looked at. And that was growing interest in the individual. We can find in her writings the attention to the individual that was growing, that sense of looking at the individual, aside from that person's social standing. So we looked at her spirituality by examining what she thought of herself, what she thought of God, what she thought about other people, and what she thought about the world she was living in. And in many ways, the whole two books can be summarized in the last two chapters of the book, Lover of Us All, because the word that always stands out when one is examining her life and her person is love. So we find in her writings to the various audiences to which she wrote, there were three pieces that she dictated. One was the general rule, which was for all of the virgins, members of the company, and she talks about the vows as we know them and other realities out of a different aspect. She was speaking from the heart of a woman who truly loved. So anything she said, the one part that I found very interesting is her insight into the vow of virginity. Because when she tells her daughters to avoid any evil with regard to virginity, she goes on to say, such as self-centeredness, backbiting, gossip, all those realities that we kind of associate with charity. But for her, it had to do with virginity. So right away you get the hint. We're talking or listening to a woman who has a different outlook on much of life. So her own understanding of herself and of God and of other people, especially other people, we realized that she was a woman of great love, a woman with a great heart that took in the broadening understanding of the earth. Because this is the time when finally they could settle once and for all that the world was round and not flat, and that the world went around the sun instead of everything circling around the earth. That was earth-shaking at the time. I mean, some people lost their lives because of that. But Angela kind of missed that part of it. She never talked about the earth as such, but her respect for all things kind of gives us an idea about how she looked at the world and all that was in it. And all had to do with the sight of love. She looked at everything with love. Love almost always includes gratitude. So we find her as a happy person. She encouraged her daughters to be happy. And so she saw joy and peace and patience, those fruits of the Holy Spirit. She expected those to be present in the lives of her daughters because she herself was filled with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, mercy, whatever, all the rest of the fruits of the Holy Spirit. That, of course, I think, set her as an outstanding member of the Renaissance people who were beginning to appreciate beauty in a new way. Look at the great artists who were working at that time, the great architects. Look at all the art that we have from that particular period. We have no idea if she ever went to view those masterpieces. I don't know if she ever saw David. We don't know that she went to Florence, but she went to other places that would have exposed her to a lot of beautiful art. Moretto was one of her friends, and Moretto was, well, not the best or the most known of artists, but he was a decent artist and known in his own area. So she was a person who was aware of beauty. So we come finally then to the end of our reflections on Angela's spirituality, and it gets summed up in she was a lover. She saw herself as a lover, and she saw God as a lover, the lover of us all. She always spoke of God as my lover, my spouse, which is such an intimate way of speaking about God and knowing God. That's how she knew God. That's a profound spirituality that we encounter with her. And she lived it. And because she lived it, it shows itself in love. So she loved her daughters, each one in particular and all of them in general. And she loved those who were surrounding her. You know, so many saints, well, partly because of their times, the women most often went to the convent, with many exceptions, but many holy women were in a religious community. But Angela wanted to stay in the world, which says she loved it. Why would she leave a reality that she loved? So she loved the world, and she loved the people who were in the world, rich and poor and young and old, the wealthy, the nobility, and the beggars at the door. So what a wonderful person she was, filled with hope. Hope in God's fidelity. She often reflected about God's fidelity to her, and so she spoke about that. We need not be anxious, she says, if you do your best. And another time she says, what reason have you not to thank the Divine Majesty? I say that to myself a whole lot. I don't think of God as Divine Majesty, but that was one of the titles that Angela gave to God. What reason have you not to thank the Divine Majesty? So she was a woman filled with gratitude, as well as love and concern for others. That was never a burden to her. She told her leaders, when she was talking about the charge that they had to take care of the company, she said, this charge ought not to be a burden to you, which is another wonderful way of looking at what we do, because sometimes we feel so burdened, all this good we're supposed to be doing. So we run around being do-gooders, and it's like, relax, would you? Enjoy it, because you're doing something good, and that's not a burden. It may cost you a lot. I mean, ask any mother and father who get awakened in the middle of the night by a crying baby. I'd much rather sleep, but I have to get up and take care of that baby whom I love dearly. And so it's not a burden. I may be dead on my feet the next day, but even that is not a burden because it's done for love. So that's kind of the way she approached life, that whatever she did, all the traveling that she did, and believe me, that was tough work to go. I mean, I can't imagine even riding a horse from Brescia to Milan. She probably didn't ride a horse. She probably rode in a wagon, which cannot have been very comfortable, or else she walked a good bit of it. She was a peripatetic holy person because she walked so much. She had to get from place to place. But it was done with joy and with a heart that was not burdened. She was free. I don't know about you, but I envy that. I want my life to be like that too, because it reflects her understanding of who God was. God was her lover, and lovers do things for one another, not as a burden, but as a joy, as a way of expressing love. So that sums up her whole life, actually, and all the effort that people went through to make sure that she became canonized, which made her an official saint in the church, which was important, because if they hadn't done that, we might not have a memory of her. The history of the company of Saint Angela unfolded is certainly a sign of God's fidelity to Angela and her vision. In fact, I think we talked about this before, that became the fourth miracle in the process of canonization. Pius VII was the Pope at the time, and he's the one who put forward that reality that it was a miracle that this tiny little company in Brescia in Italy has still persevered. At that time, it was just like a couple hundred years, but look at it now, it's over 500, and it's still flourishing. And in many forms. And so members of congregations of Ursulines sometimes feel discouraged because the novitiates are not running over as they were at one time. But on the other hand, we look around at all the influence Angela's charism has had on the world. So there are Ursulines all over the world now. Sometimes I joke and say, we're like trash. We're everywhere. But we don't do trashy things. We try to do loving things. So there are Ursulines on every continent, many cities and rural areas, and they're doing all kinds of things. They're not all teachers, not by a long shot. That is one very particular part of the history of the Ursuline order, where we were teachers, primarily teachers. But the charism is much broader than just loving in the classroom. It involves loving people who are sick, who are unhappy, who are very happy and wanting to know more. So the charism of Angela, which is a contemplative love for God with the resulting openness and eagerness to serve the needs of others, that is true just as the charism of Jesus is still true, because in many ways that's what he did. He drew others to know and love his Father as he did, which was a contemplative way of loving, and then be willing to serve, or eager to serve, all kinds of needs. In the life of Jesus, you don't have to look very far to find him doing all kinds of interesting things with all kinds of varied people. So the charism of Saint Angela is certainly related to the charism of Jesus. Otherwise, it wouldn't be very Christian, but it is. And so Angela points us to Jesus, helps us to keep our focus on doing good because Jesus calls us to that for the glory of his Father. So I don't know any other way to end this whole process that we've had except to repeat the story that's in the last chapter. And I've said it so many times, but it is still holds true. It still inspires me. Sister George Marie Long told me when she was 100 years old, "Martha, it's all about love." And she told me the same thing the next year, even though she couldn't remember my name. She knew that what she had done in her life was all about love. That's what it is about. I think that's a great gift. We may say, that's wonderful, that's what I want to do. When I grow up, I'm going to be a lover. But we do have that as a goal, but as we grow into that attitude, we recognize more and more that it's a gift from God. Because I don't think naturally our hearts are made, or they are made for love, but I don't think we concentrate on loving everyone. We don't often see that everything is about love. I find as I get older, that makes much more sense than it used to because it does make life much more simple. No matter what comes along, what I'm asked to do, or what my world is asking for, it's very simple to know that my world wants to be loved. Now that stretches my ability beyond myself and makes me realize that if I'm a lover, it's because of God's grace. It's the work of the Holy Spirit that I can be filled with love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, all the rest of it. We're called to that as members of God's wonderful, wonderful universe and family. So that's all I have to say. I hope that what I've offered over these periods, that you have found some joy in listening to that, but that you've also found a model that's worthy and that you can imitate, because Angela was a woman in a time when it really wasn't too pleasant to be a woman. She did things that women of her time certainly would not have done. Actually, all along, she never takes on the issue of male, female, but she simply went about doing what God was calling her to do, was to be a lover. You can't hide love. You can't squash it, because we are made to love. And so she gave herself to that ability that God had given her, that conviction she had that God loved her. And so she was a woman of love. And you know what? Whether we're men or women, we can still hear that within ourselves. I'm called to be a lover, and it is all about love. So thank you for your attention, and have a good day and be blessed. Thank you.